What if Rox was controlled by Emu via Domi Reversi, and that's why Roger and Garp had to defeat him at God Valley? I know, sounds a little crazy, but also kind of makes sense, right? Because as this God Valley flashback continues, and we see the full extent of the cruelty that was being inflicted, I don't know what could justify Roger and Garp, two supposed good guys, the supposed heroes of their respective factions. Why would they fight Rox and not the depraved celestial dragons or the holy knights, who I'm sure we all agree are the true evils of God Valley? So when we were reading chapter 1160, Savage Sun made a comment that I have not been able to stop thinking about since. What if Emu Domi reversied Rox? I think this could make a whole lot of sense. At the end of the day, we have to remember that there is a reason why Oda is showing us the God Valley flashback here at Elbaf of all places. In a flashback we all thought was going to center around Loki and the tragedy that befell his father. Instead, we have been feasting on the much anticipated, yet simultaneously totally unexpected God Valley flashback. This Elbaf flashback has been an absolute Rox Dieselbeck lore fest, and none of us are complaining, but we do have to wonder how this all connects back together. I mean, apart from the obvious admiration that Loki has for Rox, and the fact that I'm sure Harold will somehow get involved before this God Valley incident is over. Even still, Oda is spending so much time unpacking Rox's character, what went down at God Valley, and he's doing this completely separate to how Loki or even Harold is involved. And so I just think that there are some other threads than Loki, than Harold, and there are going to be other connections between the God Valley flashback and how it relates to the rest of the Elbaf arc. You know, we can already see that Oda has been weaving in themes and events that happened earlier on in Elbaf, and they're presenting itself during the flashback. We're seeing why this flashback is relevant, important to what's going on in the arc overall. For example, the idea of the two sides of Nika that was introduced earlier on, it's now getting even juicier with the recent reveal of the Davy D clan, with questions about what Davy Jones may represent in comparison to Joy Boy, whom we've always believed to be one of the good guys. Is the D clan inherently destined to be counterposed to each other, with one side being the champions of liberation and the other being the harbinger of destruction? Or if that's too speculative, we have to remember that as soon as the God's Knights showed up in Elbaf and started wreaking havoc, and then we were introduced to Scopper Gaban also present at Elbaf, we all put two and two together. We all said, Scopper is going to be the one that teaches the Straw Hats how to combat the God's Knights' pesky regenerative abilities. We said that he would know how to fight the God's Knights because he's gone up against them before. We knew that they would have faced off at God Valley, which is what we're seeing. But to some extent, we have actually seen some of this already. We've seen Scopper go up against Summers. We've seen Scopper suggestively hint to Luffy how to combat the regenerative abilities. And you know what? Oda didn't make a huge deal of Scopper telling Luffy about the value of his Conqueror's Haki when it comes to fighting these God's Knights. And then we also have to remember, at this moment, the God's Knights and their regenerative abilities isn't even the biggest problem right now. There is something much darker, much more serious, much more urgent going on. The appearance of Emu and their ability to control other fearsome combatants via the Domi Reversi. That is the real problem right now. Meaning that now I can't help but wonder, is this what happened to Rox? Imagine if the Rox and Roger pirates got too close to defeating all the Marines, if they harmed multiple celestial dragons, got too close to saving all the citizens of God Valley. What if Rox got too close to freeing his family, the prized Davy D clan that Emu and the world government was using this opportunity to try and exterminate this special lineage? What if, in seeing the sick and twisted games of the world government, Rox and Roger actually start working together, combine their forces to save Shaki, to kill the hateful celestial dragons, the detestable celestial dragons who are causing so much terror just for sport? Heck, maybe even Garp starts working together with them, unable to ignore his strong moral code when faced with the brutality of what's going on. And then That's when Imu steps in. Imu Domi reverses rocks, takes control of this fearsome monster, his incredible combat prowess, and Imu, via rocks, threatens to destroy all of God Valley, all of its citizens, and that's what forces Roger and Garp to turn on rocks instead. This would be so huge and work so well within the story for so many reasons. For one, like I've said already, I can't think of many reasons right now as to why Roger and Garp would focus on rocks amidst everything else going on at God Valley. To the point that they would seem like the bad guys if they chose to fight Rox instead of someone like Garling. 2. How tragic would it be if Rox's last words, his threat to Imu back in the Room of Flowers, was that he would be back. That he knows that he wouldn't have been able to do anything to Imu then, but that one day he would come back. But little did he know, Imu would get to him first. Imu would control him, take over his body, potentially even force Rox to hurt his own family. And that's the scar, the emotional damage that Blackbeard sustains, which will then eventually drive him to oppose Imu. A beautifully tragic circular story, one that could all culminate and eventually fall into place when Luffy and Blackbeard eventually team up to defeat Imu themselves. Just mwah. And then thirdly, imagine what this says about the sheer force of Imu's power and Imu's will if even Rox is able to be controlled. Because you would imagine that there has to be some sort of limit to Imu's Domi reversibility. I know we've seen even the likes of Dory and Brogy being affected. Even these two legendary warrior giants weren't immune to Imu's devil powers. But to think that even Rox, someone we've seen able to go toe-to-toe, head-to-head with an Amalfian warrior, if even the legendary Rox is susceptible to fall prey to Imu, this really shows us just how final boss Imu is. Really sets us up for that eventual war, that final battle. Gives us a taste of what we're in for, what it's going to take to bring a force like Imu down. Like I said, I could not get this thought out of my head, and as you can probably tell, I am quite sold on the idea right now. But look, let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. Also, if you've been enjoying the discussion so far, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Not only is it September, meaning that it is YouTube law for you to subscribe. In all seriousness, I would really appreciate your help in getting the JoyFleet to 100,000 subscribers. I promise you we will have fun together because we're all just a bunch of One Piece fans that can't get enough of this beloved favorite series. Back to chapter 1160, some other thoughts that I've had. We got a better look at the Davy D clan, and this is huge. We see at least 7 or 8 Davy D clan members up there on stage, and it's really intriguing the way that Oda has presented them. Because I can see 2 clan members that are noticeably larger than the others. And that really makes you wonder, because then someone from the crowd questions whether the Davy clan are also buccaneers, and seeing the size of at least 2 of those guys, that could make a lot of sense. So I think it's high time that we revisit my discussion on this very topic. And if you haven't watched that video, then I highly recommend you to do so. But I do actually think it's also time for me to do a follow-up of that video. So in the meantime, drop your thoughts, drop your suspicions as to whether you think Blackbeard really could be a buccaneer down below, and we'll get right into it. But for now, one of the other huge details is of course that one of the Davy clan is wearing what looks awfully similar to a straw hat. And when you put all the things together, like the buccaneers being worshippers of Nika, the Davy D clan being perhaps the most important D clan there is, Joy Boy, Luffy, the giant straw hat at Marijoa. Oda is absolutely tormenting us with all of these little potential clues, these details, these hints, and you know he is loving it. Okay, actually, I'm sorry, I think torment was terrible word choice given everything we have witnessed in this chapter, because there really is some terrible, horrible things going on. Expanding on the brutality that was the native hunting competition, Oda is showing us what shaped Blackbeard's worldview, the roots of his twisted perspective on freedom, power, fate. From the very first page, this chapter is brutal. A toddler Teach, barely old enough to understand the world, is forced to watch as the Celestial Dragons sneer at him, insult his mother, hurl sharp weapons, axes, swords, spears, as if the Davy D clan are less than human. They're chained up and paraded like they're worse than animals. And once again, Oda nails it by letting us witness all of this this through Teach's eyes. That mixture of confusion, pain, fear, before that worldview would eventually harden into rage and malevolent ambition. This is where the seed for whom Blackbeard would eventually become was planted. And honestly, at this point, it's going to take even more cruelty from Blackbeard's part in the current timeline to really sell, to me at least, that Blackbeard is this irredeemable villain. Because One Piece has always been consistent about one thing: characters are shaped by their circumstances. The world makes them, and then they choose whether to bend or break. Think of Doflamingo, his life of privilege turned into hell, and from there he embraced absolute corruption. Or take Kuma, abused and broken from birth, and yet somehow still choosing compassion until the very end. So then where does that leave Teach? Well, with just a handful of panels of a young Blackbeard, Oda has already made him incredibly complex. He's still a villain, make no mistake. His actions, his betrayal, all of that can't be simply waved away by just sympathy. But I can't look at these panels of him as a child and not think that this man has reasons. This man was scarred. So I do find myself really hoping that Teach does play a role in the downfall of the Celestial Dragons, because if Oda ever shows us Blackbeard laying hands on a Celestial Dragon after everything they did to him, I think I would have no chance but to cheer. That same satisfaction as when Kuma punched Saint Saturn, fist in the air, goosebumps. Not because I think Blackbeard is a hero, but just the poetic justice of it all. And Blackbeard may never be fully redeemed, but the story is setting him up as more than just a monster. He's a shadow born out of the same cruelty that produced so many other tragic figures in One Piece. And that's why he's so terrifying. Because the world is terrifying. Blackbeard's not evil, he's inevitable. I have to say that I was surprised to see Blackbeard's mother's face in this chapter. I thought Oda was saving that for some other major reveal, especially when he chose to hide the faces of both Blackbeard and Shanks' mothers in the last chapter. But now that we have seen her face, and we see that she looks very similar to Olvia, I have to say, I'm conflicted. On one hand, women in One Piece do tend to either have a Nami look or a Robin look, and a lot of the female characters just do tend to look alike. So this could just be a case of Blackbeard's mum just falling in the Robin camp of One Piece women, but I cannot ignore the part of my brain that just loves to speculate on all the tiny little pieces of information, whatever detail Oda throws our way. And so I cannot but help to ask the question, is Blackbeard's mum from Ohara? Is she related to Olvia? Are Blackbeard and Robin distant cousins? And look, with Blackbeard's level of historical knowledge, all of the world's lore and secrets, I actually would not be surprised at all if he is related to the Oharan scholars. And I know that not everyone in the series has to be connected, but Oda is sure writing his story in a way that almost everyone really is connected. And if Robin is from a more important family than we ever realized, it certainly would not be the first time that Oda did that for the Straw Hats. In fact, if we're talking about potential Straw Hat backstories, further backstories, important family lineage, it is very hard not to mention Brook after this chapter. With the reveal of Gunko as part of the Man-Mare family, which was not a part of her original introduction at Elbaf, that reveal only being added in the official volume release of the chapter many months later. And as we see Gunko also part of these killing games, and then trying to reconcile that with the glimpses of the flashback we've seen throughout the Elbaf arc, somehow connecting Gunko to Brook. Look, I don't personally believe that Brook was one of the God's Knights, but there is clearly more to the relationship between Gunko and Brook, and more to Brook's past than just his time with the Rumba Pirates. Also, when I initially read chapter 1160, when I saw the Celestial Dragons mention God's Sword, I just assumed that they were talking about Garling as the famed sword, the famed tool that is a champion to these people. But then I read this comment from Uncalagon the Black Metalhead, and Gunko being God's Sword actually does make much more sense. As the one that can be directly possessed by Imu, as we've seen in Elbaf, Gunko could be Imu's sword, the God Sword. And then we're introduced to more of these God's Knights, some of whom we've already seen during the initial God Valley flashback from Egghead Island arc, but others that we're only seeing for the first time here. And it makes me so mad that the God's Knights were given their own hype spread, because they are so despicable, so detestable, so irredeemable as we keep seeing more of their brutal, cruel actions. But you also can't deny that Oda has made them look also very cool, very drippy. I hate them, but I can't deny it. Otherwise, something that really spoke to me in this chapter, the MVP has to be Dragon. Just as we're seeing what shaped Blackbeard's worldview, we are witnessing the same for Dragon. The moment that solidified for him what his role is in this world, what his mission is. And I just love that Oda is keeping very true to his character, even as he is shocked and outraged at the actions of the Celestial Dragon. He doesn't actually kill them himself. And that really all just goes back to the pacifist nature of Dragon, a consistency that I find just absolutely brilliant. Because the way that the other Marine is wondering what Dragon has gotten up to, it seems to me that Dragon has regularly caused a bit of headache for his Marine higher-ups, what with his moral code. And so I'm really excited to delve further into the Dragon piece of it all. But look, I recently made a video saying that you all better be buying Dragon stocks, and I'm just so excited at not only the vindication, but so much that Oda is promising with Dragon's character. He's really portraying him to be number one. I mean, the rest of the chapter is filled with so much darkness and cruelty, and even if the appearance of Rox, Roger, Garp, and their respective factions is beyond hype, I have to say it's really only Dragon that radiates that sense of purity and goodness. He's the only one that seems to be truly selfless here. And we can all make jokes about Dragon looking forever east, but you know what I think? He's just looking far into the future, far into the future that none of us can even comprehend. This man has a will and drive that is just unmatched. These early beginnings of Dragon's mission that would one day change the world. It tells us everything about why the world government fears him the most. He's always been willing to challenge their so-called divine right head-on, even before he had the revolutionary army behind him, even when he was just one man. And if that was his mindset as a teenager, imagine what kind of man he has actually grown into. In the meantime, I am biting my nails because although he has managed to keep the two red-haired twin boys alive for now, even though they're safe, even though they're together, we know where the story goes. We know that they're eventually going to be separated. And I'm sure that's going to further impact Dragon in terms of his sense of self, his sense of the world, his sense of justice. And on that Shanks front, I am very intrigued as to why Oda is going to such lengths to keep the red-haired woman's face obscured, why it's being kept hidden. After revealing Blackbeard's mother's face, you'd think that maybe we'd also get to see Shanks's mother. I was actually even thinking that they might look quite alike. But no, we haven't seen her yet, so you can't help but wonder what Oda is cooking up his sleeve. But I think we know what Oda is planning for the next chapter. A massive, epic clash between Rox, Roger, Garp, the God's Knights, the God Valley incident that we have been waiting for. If chapter 1160 was only the setup, this glorious chapter, only the setup, you just know that the actual God Valley incident is going to blow our brains. Unfortunately, we do have a chapter break in between, but don't you fear because I will be here to fill your One Piece hole, so make sure to subscribe. Please also like and share the video to show more support. You can also support the channel further like these wonderful people by becoming a channel member. But as always, thank you so much for listening to another one of my crazy One Piece ramblings. These are just some of my thoughts after reading chapter 1160, but let me know what you think by leaving a comment below. I can't wait to read it. But for now, this is JoyGirl, and I'll see you again soon.